everyone, and good whatever wonderful moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones as you watch or listen to our conversation today. It is day 10 of our November series, and it's also the last day for our November series. I can hardly believe it's already December, but well, it is what it is. We have to believe the calendar. I will be your co host for the next hour. My name is Minola Jacques, and we will be discussing today about agile HR practices, and namely about implementing these practices with flexible processes and policies. Now, we have an amazing lineup of speakers, and don't take my word for it. Jessa is backstage helping us with everything running smoothly. So, Jessa, please just bring our panelists on the screen. And in the meantime, I will just say hello to everybody joining. I see the comments started to pop up in our chat. So please do let us know where you're connecting from. And also, just a kind reminder and a very, very warm encouragement. Do keep the conversation going in the chat as well. Consider the questions open to you and drop your insights, your learnings, drop any kind of resources that you have found helpful in your work, and do help us spread the good word of Agile in our community. Now, what we will do, we will start off with the intro round of answers. And this time is easy. So just please shortly introduce yourselves. I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on the screen clockwise. And in addition to your short introduction, I would ask you, what was the moment when Agile became meaningful to you, when you saw the value of Agile? And one thing that I will need your help with, panelists, is when you are not talking, if you can stay on mute, because otherwise it gets a little bit tricky technically. So, Pameline, welcome. It's good to see you. Short intro, and when did you fall in love with Agile?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. So Pamela Eichelberger, usually the longest name on the screens when I do these panels. I'm a VP of Talent Strategy with Nielsen. Just been practicing HR for 20 years, and actually been an Agile practitioner for almost 10 now. And I think that light bulb moment for me came. I actually stepped out of HR and was the chief of staff with a large banking company, and was stepping into learning about how to start to transition from waterfall into Agile, and really just digging in from like ground zero, learning what Agile was all about, and realizing the capability of what it can bring to how businesses operate was my aha moment. So when I went back into HR, I was thrilled to be able to bring that with me.
How wonderful. Wayne, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Manila. Good to see everybody else. I'm Wayne Tarkin. I am a teacher at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School. I also have a business focused on developing the Agile leader in the organization. I've had about 20 years of inside HR experience. I fell in Agile kind of a unique way. I became a Scrum Master. I took a diversion from HR into developing software for IBM and Comcast. And one day I just had an epiphany. Why can't we use this stuff in HR? I had been frustrated, like many people, with projects that went on and on and on, or were not successful. And I saw how agile ways of working enabled us to take a big complex project, break it down, and do incremental improvements. And so I really approached that idea with HR probably 2015. And so it's nice to see it has been evolving, although we still have a ways to go. So glad to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kelly, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Dragovich. I'm based in the Bay Area in California. I've been in HR in tech for about 23 years, companies like Intuit, then Yahoo. And then for the past 14 years have been the head of people, chief people officer for high growth venture-backed companies like GitHub and Looker, and now at Pendo. So I love just being around tech for years. The agile model and how it's evolved has been fascinating. And I don't think enough HR teams work that way. And so we love the Scrum mentality. We love the flexibility. We set up our operating mechanisms and our priorities around kind of that no huddle offense. And, you know, these companies change every month or so in very real ways. And so we have to remain nimble, flexible, and fast. So that's something that I've always practiced, and happy to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you so very much. And last but not least, this panel wouldn't have been perfect without Mindy. So good to see you.
Oh, thank you so much, Manila. It's so great to be here. I mean, always excited about Hacking HR conversations. I learn so much from each one. So Mindy Honkoop, and I have been an HR practitioner and in-house for over 20 years, but about a year ago, stepped outside of being in-house to start my own business, Agile in HR, also providing fractional HR services, and also helping teams transform their ways of working to be agile. And I fell in love with Agile probably before I knew it was Agile. Even as a social worker, we can't do all the things, and helping people really think about change and how do we change and take that next step. But the official falling in love happened when I was a chief of staff at HomeAway, and that role was purposely put in place to help HomeAway with an agile transformation across the organization, but also specifically within the HR team.
It's so wonderful having all of you here, and I just want to anticipate a little bit some of the most popular questions we will soon start to get from the audience. Yes, this conversation is being recorded, and you can go back and re-listen or recommend it either from our LinkedIn space or from hackinghrlab.io. Now, before we jump very, very deep into the topic of processes and policies, I would really love to take a few minutes and demystify agile in HR, because I am sure that we can all think quite easily back to some experiences where some organizations and some leaders suffering from the shiny object syndrome would label it agile and then be very surprised when everything turned fragile. So let's take a few minutes and really demystify what is agile HR practices. And I will just leave this question there, and we will consider this the practice for the unmuting competition. So let's see who. Wayne, I see you unmuted.
Yes, I think that's a common challenge when we talk about agile. A lot of people say, well, you have to be a programmer for that, right? Or you have to be in IT. And I mean, it used to be that way, but I think all of us in the call, have adopted some of the principles, the essence of agile. I created something called EBITDA. It's not earnings before income taxes. It's experimentation. You break things down, incremental work, time-boxed activities, delegating, developing servant leadership, always be engaged with customers. These are key agile concepts, but we've taken out the technical elements and just keep the essence of what's involved. And so things like how you run meetings, how you do reports, those are all kind of common sense ways that we found that people can really get into agile, understand it better, not be turned off by, the IT or the technical requirements of it.
I'll piggyback off of Wayne. I think for me, for trying to roll out Agile in an HR environment versus the tech, and like most of this group have been in the tech space for almost my entire career. It really, I think about it as being less about a tool set. We always talk about Agile and tech as being a toolkit. It's a mindset. And so it should infuse everything that we're thinking about. So it's not just about putting a framework around how we create a process or policy, but it really is, to Wayne's point, thinking about continuous improvement. How do we make space for experimentation so that we can continue to elevate and pick up velocity on how fast we're able to meet the needs of the business, which is really at the core of what HR is here to do. So putting that business first mindset into place and figuring out how we can move more quickly, whether it's around strategy, structure, or process, in a way that supports the business in an agile way.
Yeah, that's
Kelly.
great. I can jump in. Sure. I think the word agile can be scary, even though it's a small word. It can be scary for a lot of folks. What does it mean? For us, I think our roles are starting to become more like product managers, right? So we kind of very simply put, it's like, let's design our programs, our processes, the experiences for employees as if you were a product manager, which means step by step, customer back, right? Those mappings. What is the end outcome? What are we driving for as far as what that experience should be? And then kind of building it with them. So, right, we have user design sessions. We talk to our customers as we're designing our products, and we're big fans of doing that and actually building the products inside the company that we are responsible for with the customers.
I love what everyone said. It was like ticking off the boxes of my answers for this question. So trying to build on top of what everyone said. It's also, I think we get so scared and they get so focused on how to do it, then we often forget why are we doing it, and really thinking about what are those continuous improvement outcomes that we're doing, and what is that one thing that we could start out with versus all of us, like, and all the things, and find that one thing and start there, and then start to build. It's like a muscle, it's a capability, because how you also are doing agile, it's also going to improve. It should also look different. If it doesn't, you're probably doing something wrong. I think the one thing that also it opens up for HR, we often can get siloed even within our HR departments, where recruiting is just doing recruiting, benefits is just doing benefits. Agile also has the idea of the teaming and all the doers on that team. So how can we also think about who's on these teams, depending on what are we doing, and really break down those silos and kind of start to think cross-functionally, even outside of HR. How do we start to design and co-share some of the initiatives that we're working on?
So just a small spoiler alert. There is a mental post-it now in my head with where do we start? And we will come back and pick that one up. I was wondering, what are some of the prerequisites that are necessary in an organization? And Pamelin, I love that message you have behind you with always do what you're afraid to do. So I would really love to hear, in addition to the prerequisites, what would be some of the mindsets, some of the skill sets within HR that HR should let go in order to become agile?
I love this question. That could be a whole session in and of itself, I think. If I have to distill it down, I think around what we need to get set up. I always talk about, to our earlier point, around sort of picking one thing. So pick your problem, define your problem statement. Always work with the business in mind, and work backwards from there. In terms of how I think about what's needed, and where I try to focus on my own teams, it is design thinking is a big topic as we start to talk about transforming into an agile environment. Again, going back to, it's not just about writing a process map and sort of, that old school view of HR as policy police. It really is about encouraging experimentation. It really is about defining a problem statement, using design thinking principles to really get around whatever that problem is, be able to understand the motivations behind it, the blockers that are in the way, to be able to design better, truly people-centered solutions. I think that the challenge is oftentimes we'll try to come in and fix everything to fix the world, and things get over-engineered, and then it feels overwhelming, and then we're back to waterfall, or we're back to doing what we've always done. So really just making it into a one item sprint, and then building on those successes, and it will snowball. And to the earlier point around sort of that cross-functional piece, that's critical. We can't function as HR as effectively when we're siloed as we can when we are sort of spreading the love of that methodology and that approach cross-functionally.
Wayne.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I think the one advice I would give is to start slowly and small. I see a lot of organizations come up with these massive change initiatives, spend millions of dollars, and nothing works. Agile is going to be messy at the beginning. People are going to wonder what's going on. I'm not used to doing this. Every time we teach a class or client, it's the same thing. We say it's going to be messy. It's going to be messy, and they finally get it. But it takes some time. And so you really have to lay the groundwork to say this is going to be unusual. It's going to be uncomfortable, but the good news is we're going to wind up better. Obviously, you'd like to have a generative culture. You have to have a culture where people cross boundaries. They don't shoot the messenger. They don't beat up people for mistakes, but they use them as learning. Ideally, you're not going to get there, but I think if a leader of a unit demonstrates that, is transparent, I think that sets the tone. The big thing about Agile is it frees people up to be themselves. It frees people up to use their talents and their skills like they've never done before. And so it starts with the leader doing that. In terms of functional area, I've seen done a lot of recruiting, onboarding. They typically are cross functional. It's a nice place to have a pilot project working on an aspect of that. But again, I'm sure all of us in the call agree, it's not going to be easy. But once you get beyond the learning curve and do things, you have dramatic improvements, which is what we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think this actually takes a lot of weight off of HR teams. I think there's been a lot of pressure to be behind the curtain, creating the perfect program or process, almost in a too much of an academic way. And if you look at business leaders, especially in tech and high growth, they're pressured to do things with 70% of the information, right? They're go, move, and get things. And those two things, they're at odds. And I think that's why a lot of HR teams have struggled in the innovative, fast-moving tech companies, because they're not working the same way. And so for me, it's almost like an easier skill set to be able to let things go a little bit and leverage these people, right? Work with the business leaders, work with the cross-functional teams, as Wayne and Pamela was saying, and let them help you design that. And that's a facilitative skill set versus let me go behind the curtain for 3 days and make it perfect and present it out, but it's just more impactful, right? So.
Yeah, I love that. I think woven into what everyone was saying, really, just to summarize, it's growth mindset. It's also about change resiliency. You can't get comfortable doing the same thing the way you always have done it. You need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's also about transparency and how do we start to become transparent, and understanding, who's doing what and how are we doing that together. And then together, that word together is also really important because it's not about individual, it's about together. So we need to be collaborative. We need to work together. So how do we start to incentivize groups and teaming versus individual? And also, how do we start to get comfortable with letting go of perfection and embracing experimentation, which is definitely going to lead to failures? So how do we celebrate failures, and start to think about failure in a different way?
I would just add that, how we deal with failure is a really critical piece of that. Obviously, in HR, we're always taught to do things perfectly, else we'll get sued. And we spend so much time trying to get things perfect. It takes forever to get things done. And in reality, you're never going to be perfect. And so I think, a lot of organizations used to have a ready, aim, fire philosophy. Now it's ready, fire, aim afterwards. In some ways, the pandemic was the best thing to happen in HR from a perspective of value and learning to do things differently. So March 19th, we had plans for the year, and March 20th or March 30th, we're all gone. And so what do? We didn't have a perfect plan for moving everybody off site. We said, just go home, we'll figure it out later on. And so that's a definition of agile, being able to respond to things, not having it perfect coming up with some ideas, some constraints, and then figuring out later on. And unfortunately, the way the world is like that nowadays, and that's the challenge for HR is can we adapt? We've had pandemic 1, 2, 3. We've had racial issues. We've had recession issues. We've had inflation issues. So it's really a way of doing business now is can we adopt that ready for aim mentality to not expect to be perfect, but a commitment to employees. We'll get it right eventually, but you're going to work with us as we iterate to get where we need to go.
As I was listening to your answers, I heard that agile is messy, that it takes time. And I also heard that agile HR is not a neatly, cleanly boxed up within HR initiative. So I am now curious, with all these realities, how do we communicate about agile in an organization, and who do we engage with? And Mindy, I would invite you to go first, just keeping you safe from the hot seat of going last.
So Manola, just for your question, just to clarify your question, are you asking about who starts kind of thinking about this and is launching this within the HR team? Is that the question?
I would say that's part of the question. The question was as broad as I could word it. Like how do we communicate about agile in organization? And what you just mentioned can be sub parts of the bigger question.
Yeah. And how do we communicate it? Then it's organizationally within our ecosystem. Is this an agile ecosystem? It's kind of also first taking a step back. And if it's not, and that's where we want to go, if this is a strategy of the business, and first of all, how are we? It should always go back to and tie to, as Pamela said, the strategy of the business. And then how do we then weave that into our communication as a business? So how are we then thinking about agile and how we discuss our values, how we recognize, how do we hire, how do we onboard? It should become and woven into everything that we do. It should be woven into our performance conversations. It should be woven into our daily one-on-ones. And then what does that look like? And how do we define agile within our organization? What does success look like there so that we can recognize and reward and hold each other accountable, that we're able to really clearly communicate that, not just from the executive team, but all the way down to that individual contributor. And if we're in a manufacturing firm, how does even people on our floor understand what success looks like for me in my role? So even getting down to role definition, look to be agile. And so that we can become a self-governing team, which is another key concept of agile, and start to hold each other accountable and have peer accountability.
I think Mindy hit on some really great points. If I can jump in, that overarching sort of, and I'm anti-HR speaking buzzwords, but I'll use this one, North Star. I think really defining what that North Star is for the organization is key as part of rolling out Agile, and because everybody's got to be tied to something and understand how their work aligns to what it is we're trying to accomplish. And so when I think about what that looks like for me, when we roll out Agile, and I've done this in tiny little startups where it's 3 of us, and I've done this, at Citibank, where it's this huge undertaking as part of an organization of 25,000 people. And I think what's key, number one, is getting your sponsors, so getting your leadership team together, identifying your North Star and strategy, and then thinking about sort of what those first steps should look like in terms of a roadmap. Those baby steps that Wayne alluded to earlier, you start small and let it snowball out. I said that again. But for me, that North Star piece that Mindy referred to is critical, because without that commonality, that common piece of it that ties everybody together, it's going to be really hard to gain traction and maintain velocity. And that's what Agile is all about, really, is being able to pick up that speed and agility as we're partnering with the business to deliver on what they need.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've done too that's been really helpful is the Agile model forces us to talk to the company about what we're doing and why. and who we are. And I think that's where a lot of HR teams struggle, right? Because everyone's like, we don't hear from you. What are you doing back there? It's conspiracy theory and et cetera, et cetera. And being able to explain what you're building while it's messy and while it's in flight, and being transparent about how that's happening, right? That transparency of process, it helps the company believe you, and it wins hearts and minds, and it uncovers the work that we are doing and why we're doing it, and kind of stops that water cooler cabal conversation, because you're being open about it. And we kind of think about it like doing HR on stage. And that agile model so nicely supports that, because every month or every 2 weeks, right, when you have company all hands or town halls, you're talking about where you are in building this thing and how employees can participate if they want to. And that inclusivity, it's very helpful, but it also takes a lot of pressure off the team, which is great.
Yeah, I would add that most of us are, I guess, lone rangers in many sense. Those of us who are driving change, where it's part of our DNA. I don't have any choice. I have to push things, and that's why I'm outside an organization versus being inside. But there's different skill set there. So, but you really have to pick your battles. You're not going to be able to change everybody. In fact, most people will disagree. Find that one manager, leader who really buys into this, who has the same needs and concerns that you have, and hitch your wagon to them. Try a pilot program, come up with some successes. And Malcolm Gladwell talks about a tipping point. And that's where change really happens. It starts at the bottom and grows till it tips. Everybody wants to be involved. So you got to pick your battles. And a lot of times in HR, we want to be consistent. We want to treat everybody the same way. Well, you want to be fair, but you can't always treat everybody the same way. You really have to focus on those that are more responsive to your efforts. Get them on board, because you're going to be exhausted. Pushing against the wall, pushing against resistance, it's tiring. People give up, they get frustrated, they leave. But if you can get people to buy into you and create small successes that create more small successes and grow and exponentially improve, that's how you do it. So again, I believe in starting small, going slow, and then you really go fast once you get to a certain point.
Well, we are approaching the middle of our conversation, and I would really love to bring into the panel a comment and a question that we have in the chat. So thank you so much, Terry, for dropping this. I hear agile takes time, but yet HR needs to move more quickly, and everything can be perfect as we did during the pandemic. Which is it? Hurry up and slow down? So this pretty much picks up on some of the bits that we've already touched on, and is giving us an opportunity to maybe go a little bit deeper. And I guess that this is something that is on audience's mind after listening to our conversation today. So which is it? Hurry up and slow down? Who wants to be the pioneer on?
I can jump in. I think it's hurry up on less things. If I had to summarize it, and I would encourage everyone to have a point of view on this, because it's easy to get thrashed around, right? Do this or do that, hurry up. And a lot of folks they jump, they say how high. And I think it's important to kind of just step back and be really thoughtful about, okay, what does this mean? Like, what are all the things that we're doing on the HR side? How does this apply to each of them or not? What happens if I stop doing something or push it out? Do things fall? Does it impact the business? And so I think with putting this in place, rethinking what you're doing has to be with it. You can't just blanket put it on everything that you're doing. And so I having your feet cemented in and having a point of view on this and why, I think is just as important as saying, we're going to go do it.
I think Agile enables HR to say no more often. Not that you want to say no all the time, but we have a problem with prioritization. We have so much thrown at us that we can't figure out which to work on first. I hear this time and time again. The beauty of an agile process is you develop priorities, you stack rank things, and you need some rigor around that. You need some be able to say no, but that's the beauty of agile is you have a methodical way to identify what's a priority, what are the requirements, let's build this, and then we'll get to that. You have a certain capacity limitations. Most HR departments, don't do that. They just kind of say yes, 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 and then they'll deliver. And so I think if I was a customer, I'd rather you say no, but be realistic to me about when you can deliver. That way my expectations are met and I'm not upset because you didn't deliver what I thought you would at the time I thought you would do it.
I think that's what I love about Agile is that it gets us out of that order taking mode and into, we're not saying no. What we're saying is not right now because we've got a list of priorities that we're working against. So I think back to what everybody here has said. For me, it comes back to really picking your battles, deciding on which things are the most critical. To Wayne's point, prioritization is key, and the more we flex that muscle, the better we're going to get at it. But I think a lot of us in HR are just feeling like everything is P0 at this point. Everything is an emergency. Everything needs to be done right now, which means nothing is an emergency and nothing gets done well right now. So it lets us, it actually empowers us to saying no instead of saying yes. It lets us really be viewed as more of a strategic business partner because we're not just saying no, we're saying no because here's the prioritization, here's the why. And it lets us, I think, make more thoughtful decisions that can be more impactful instead of being spread out, trying to fix everything at once and put out 25 fires. We're focusing on the 2 or 3 things that are going to make the biggest difference and have the most impact on how we operate.
Just one example of how a simple thing can really make a big impact. I think it was either G or IBM adopted Agile as part of their recruiting process. And as part of that, they said, we're not going to do any interviews until a manager firmly commits to dates that they can interview people. Now, I know about you, but it was frustrating when you have interviews lined up, but you can't get managers to commit to a time. So imagine the impact on that simple thing. If you can have that rigor around that, you speed up the process tremendously. So Agile is not about big things. It's about taking small things, improving them so that they scale to other greater successes.
Mindy.
And what I love about what everyone's saying is also it forces us to kind of take a step back and not think about just all the things or the activities. Where it gets us to think about outcomes, and that then enables us to think about our capacity, the prioritization. For personal and actual real world example, when I did this when I was at another company, it provided us the opportunity to be transparent about the work that we were doing because we were actually able to speak to it and we were able to show what was in progress, what's in our backlog. It was very often the managers would be coming or leaders, hey, can you do this right now? And instead of jumping on that, there actually was a conversation of which of these things then do we as an organization need to pause on and move back in order to take this in? That help me understand why this is a priority right now. Or is it tied to something we're already working on and now we've discovered? And if we do this, that actually solves for that thing that you're thinking of. It enables us to have better conversations with managers to truly understand the work and how the work greater impacts the larger organizational priorities.
Yeah, Mindy, I was going to piggyback on that. You actually can kind of do more by doing less with this, and if you step back and look at those things like, oh, well, these 2 initiatives connect, or these 2 activities are actually connected into this one larger outcome. And so you can kind of have that 1 + 1 = 3 effect with this, which could surprise you. So
I hope I am not the only one experiencing a reality where, irrespective of the conversation, it's almost impossible to be 30 minutes in it without someone saying, okay, metrics, analytics, how do we measure? What do we measure? So I would really like to bring that question into our conversation. So how do we measure agility, and what do we measure for agility? Let's see who takes the first step at this one. We're not
Well-
measuring time, response time.
That's right. We have to be rapid. No. In terms of the focus, really should be on outcomes, not output. I think Mindy mentioned that. All our systems are tied into output. Performance appraisal systems, everything we do is really how much can you produce in a certain amount of time. When in fact, what really matters is what value do you bring to the customer. And, you know, time to fill, things like that are important. But what more important would be time to proficiency of a new employee. All right, that would tell me more about getting a new employee onboarded, hired, and developing them to they can make a contribution. So it's really shifting the mindset to be more outcome focused than output. I think that's really a critical focus. And ask your customers what's important to them. How do I measure? What measurements would you like from me? It's not, we want to co-create things with our customers. It's not really HR sole responsibility to create things. You want to co-create things with others. And I think if you guys come up with a common metric of focused on value and outcomes with your customers, that's really where you want to go.
I think the thing that I love the most about HR might be paralyzing to folks who are just getting into it. Not HR, Agile, sorry. And it goes back to what Wayne said. It really is, there's not this black and white list of here's the things that you must check off. I agree 100% it is about outcomes, but we get to define what that means for us as HR leaders, for our business leaders. And so it's going to look different from business to business, from sprint to sprint even, which means we have, again, the autonomy, the accountability for it. And I think it goes back to, for me, measuring things like predictability. I'm going to do that differently than Wayne might or than Kelly might, right? But there's ways for us all to do that. And so it lets us define what that needs to look like. And then we have sort of the best way to figure out, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't. What do we put through into the next sprint? I think that the other piece of it that I would just caution against is to jump in head first. Let's do Agile. This is going to be great. Here's the first sprint. Here's the roadmap, without having that how are we measuring what successful looks like? Because I do see that happening as well. And it just winds up being this sort of permanent reactive, shiny object. Oh, let's go try this next. Let's go try that next. But they don't know what's working and what's not. So there's no way to make it an iterative process that's building on itself.
Yeah, and it's like when you're thinking about that definition of done, so what is that? How do we measure that definition of done? If we don't have baseline measures, then to be able to show the value of the outcome, as Wayne said, then it may be that we need to do this to be able to get a baseline, so that when we're making hypotheses, we're able to say, if we do this, then we anticipate this will happen, so that when we do launch something, we can see where did it move the needle. That then informs the next set of iteration of that work.
Yeah, I my only add to all of this is not to overcomplicate it. The worst thing you can do is create 20 beautiful, shiny HR data metrics that no one cares about. And I'm just being real. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the P&L is our metric, and I do love things that have inputs into that P&L, right? How fast are people ramping? What percentage of our sales reps are meeting quota, right? The 70-70 kind of rule. 70% of our reps are attaining 100% or more. What are our ship rates and our product shipments? Are they on time? What is our revenue per employee? Are we efficient? And those types of things. So, pick the vitals that do matter to your business. Make sure that your metrics are connected to the business. But again, the navel gazing that sometimes happens with very smart, right, academic experimentation HR teams can be paralyzing. So keep it simple and keep it connected to the bottom line is kind of my two litmus tests.
I love how naturally you brought the conversation to the point where I can keep myself honest with the promise of where to start. For everybody in the audience who bought into agile HR practices by now, where do you start?
I often start just with a conversation of, like, often HR leaders I can't even answer. Like, I don't even know how my team is spending their time, or where are they spending their time, who is doing what. And so just being able to get together and have a conversation around a wall of work, like what is it that we're actually focused on. Often they don't even know their own capacity because they don't understand what are all the things that we're doing. They might know at a high level, but they might not know the minutia. And so being able to get the team together to be able to kind of take that step back to understand, really helps uncover a lot of aha moments. And we often uncover that there's usually two people doing the same thing, or there's things that people are doing that no one knew they were doing. Which probably means if no one cared about it, they're probably spending some time on something that shouldn't be done.
I think for me, when I stepped out of HR and I got asked to move into this chief of staff role at Citi, I had to learn. I had to understand what Agile was. That was step one for me, was just getting my arms and my head around what does Agile look like in an ideal state? How do I plug in? I practiced it for a few years before I stepped into the Scrum Master role. I was product owner for a couple of years before that. And so I think for me, where do you start is just understanding the basics of Agile methodologies. And that doesn't mean taking a $3,000 course. It doesn't mean having to take a 6-month, course on it. It just means doing your research and understanding sort of what it is and what you need from it individually and as an organization. And then for me, I think it was Wayne or Kelly that talked about finding that one manager that's like, yeah, I'm in with you on this is great. And using that as sort of like, this is where we're going to start and build that excitement and that momentum. And that's where you sort of start to define, okay, who's going to help me on this journey? And then with that team, whether it's 2 or 10 people on that leadership team, then it's around what do we want to do? Not over engineering, not trying to fix, boil the ocean, right? We're picking 1 or 2 key things, and then building a roadmap around it. I mean, it really is that simple and that methodical, and there's no need to sort of, I think everybody wants to go so fast and get it in and get it done. But it's just a very, learn it, find somebody that's in it with you, figure out what you want to start on, and then start building what it looks like to get there.
Yeah, I would ask your customers. A lot of times HR does things for HR because they think it's the right thing to do and they have good intentions, but the reality is, when it doesn't work out, then they wonder why. And so you have customers that are probably not happy or frustrated. Reach out to them and say, I hear you. I attended this great Hacking HR webinar, and I talked about Agile. Let's give it a try. I think I want to focus on adding more value to you. Agile is good for complex situations where there's no easy answer. Things like Lean can be done, process improvement, things like that. But I think Agile works best when it's a complex situation that you haven't been able to solve, or you have no idea what to do, like COVID. And so really just, let your customers be your North Star. What do they need that you can help them deliver? And there's a lot of things you can deliver, way more than you ever imagined. Just be creative about that. Listen to them, and then figure out a way you can help them sleep better at night.
Yeah. Wait, that's exactly what I was going to say. I feel like we're Jeopardy with the mute thing, who can do it fastest, but it's amazing what your customers can give you as far as your roadmap. So if the definition of Agile is customer back, just start talking to them about what they think your product is, and go from there.
I would love to get back to prioritization and to something that to me sounded a little bit like a game of domino. So what's the smallest change that can have the biggest impact? And a few weeks back, thanks to some comments during a panel, I promised myself that whenever possible, I will raise this question. So for an HR function of 1, and I am sure that many people in the audience live in this reality of an HR function of 1, how can they use Agile best? How can they start? How can they use Agile to prioritize? And how can they prioritize Agile so that they can showcase its benefits as soon as possible. And Wayne, I saw you nodding, so I would really invite you to start on this one.
Yeah, I might reorient the question a little bit in terms of not talking about Agile per se, but how can I help you be more successful, right? I've worked with one HR person companies numerous times, or two HR. And the challenge is a lot of times the leaders say they want certain things, but they don't really walk the talk. And I went down the path to kind of build something that they never really wanted in the first place. So it's really understanding, it's really, what's the value? How can I help you, again, sleep better at night? Whether it's better employees, whether it's more accountability, whether it's better salespeople, those are the things that I think you really need to focus on in terms of priority. Because, leaders have a smaller company CEO has tons of stuff they're working on. And so I think my suggestion is you position yourself as a solution to help them prioritize things that you can help them do better at.
Kelly.
Yeah, look, an HR person of one, I would sit down with the leaders, the CEO immediately, and just kind of, again, go back. What are we trying to do? Where are we trying to get to? I think with an HR person of one, it's very easy to try to be all things to all people, and kind of turn into what the organization is telling you from all nooks and crannies. And we use the term North Star a lot. It's what is the North Star? Be very clear on that with the leadership of the organization, because as one person, you might only have time to do one big thing, one big rock in addition to all the sand that's going on. And so do not get thrashed around, by the day to day as one person, and maybe trying to get approval for a second person.
I love that, because it's about moving, again, like we've been talking about before, out of activities to using the conversation of outcomes. And it really requires that business acumen. And so getting really comfortable seeing yourself being a part with that executive team, discussing the strategy of the business, understanding like what do we need to be successful, and what is my part that I play in that. How do these activities, how do I tie them to outcomes that then tie to the strategy of the business?
I think for me, there's some advantages. I'll probably get flack for saying this, to being in a department of one in this, because you really do have the ability to drive on the discovery piece, which is critical for figuring out how to prioritize, right? The focus has to be on building relationships, because you're it. Which is a key component of having a successful Agile implementation. So I think, having that time with leadership, working, again, as we've all been saying all along, working customer back to figure out where the problems are. That relationship building piece is going to be critical, because it's also going to get you to your sponsors to figure out, okay, how do we help? What's priorities? What's priority number one? And so I think, to sort of tying it together what everybody said, is figuring out how to move out from doing to strategizing, from administrative to strategic, means that you get to really focus on discovery and building relationships as part of that initial, how do we kick this off as an HR team of one?
I was replaying our conversation in my mind, and I would love to take a few of the last minutes to look at. There are two conversations, a conversation about Agile and a conversation about continuous improvement. And I have seen so many times these two conversations getting overlapped, muddied, cross-used and misused and misperceived. So I would really love to hear your thoughts on how do these two philosophies come together, and how are they feeding each other and augmenting each other. And I see a lot of thoughtful nodding, so I guess the struggle is real for more people, not just for me. Kelly, would you like to tackle it.
Yes, I will be honest, my internet broke up a little bit on one of the questions. So when you said these two philosophies really quickly, could you tell me the first one?
Agile and continuous improvement. So how do they augment each other? How do they feed each other? How are they separate?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's For me, it's just iteration. For me, it's how do you continuously improve quickly? Right, it's that fail fast type of mentality. And how are you setting up the operating mechanisms and your schedule of how you're working to be able to do that? And that is the involvement. That it's a very careful communication process, I think, to be able to rally the organization around this. And again, what I said before is explain what you're doing, explain how you're working and why, because otherwise people might just not show up. They might not get it. I mean, you might find yourself kind of alone with this amazing playbook. And so to be able to continuously improve working agile, you got to be very explicit about how you're working, what these things are, and involve people. And so when they show up, they know why they're there to be able to help you do that.
I think it relates to whether you do agile or you be agile. There's a difference there, right? Doing agile is just doing the rituals and artifacts, but being agile is more philosophy. It's a way of life. And so to me, they're interchangeable. Agile is about improvement. It's about taking something and breaking it down to small pieces and incrementally improving it with constant feedback from the customer. So to me, it's one of the same, but you need to have that mindset. You need to have that being agile so that you can deal with failure in a positive way. You learn more from failure than you do from successes. And so how can you adopt that mindset that, we're going to fail our way through, we're going to learn, we're going to get better. And, so to me, they're interchangeable.
Bain said something that made me a little moment of realization. I think that HR, old school HR, has been always trying to sort of get rid of the gray space, right? We want everything black and white. We want our checklists. We want to have policies and everything mapped. I think as you transition into whether it's agile, and you're talking about agile or talking about continuous improvement, I do think they're definitely intertwined. As HR practitioners and leaders, we need to be comfortable with gray and working in the gray, because as we roll out agile, for me, it's all about experimentation and design thinking. That's part and parcel to Wayne's point about being agile versus doing agile. I think when you make the space for that, I think that you wind up allowing for things like brainstorming and storyboarding sessions and all these really cool creative things that speak to customer needs, that can hopefully keep folks motivated because they're all working in their own ways and it's valued, and it's not everybody's having to do the same thing the same way. And I think, keeping that focus on continuous improvement is more easily done when you make space for, experimentation, when you make space for testing new ideas, and you set the expectation that it's never done, that we're always looking for new ways to optimize. And as technological advances speed up, we've all read about this. We have to be ready to pivot where we recognize the need.
I mean, I think what everyone said is, if you aren't being agile, if you aren't truly putting on that mindset or shifting to that mindset, if you're not doing that, you're not going to see continuous improvement as an outcome. I think if you are being agile, you're naturally going to see continuous improvement, because you are going to always be thinking, okay, you're curious, you're experimenting, you're iterating, you're getting feedback from your employees and your executives. It's almost impossible to not be continuously improving in doing and being this way.
It is so painful and frustrating to say that we are about 3 minutes away from saying goodbye. We will try to wrap this conversation up a couple of minutes before the hour, just to allow people to roll on from one panel to another. But I would really love to take these final 3 minutes and make them topic-free question. So I am wondering, as you were thinking about the panel today, is there something that is very important and very meaningful to you that we didn't get to cover through our conversation that you want to leave the audience with? And I will give you a few seconds to think about. We will go just as we started. So we will start with Pamela and then go clockwise from there. But in the meantime, I would love to just thank everybody for staying with us throughout the conversation, welcoming those who just jumped on the link. And we will have another great panel coming up in a few minutes. So Pamela, ready to go?
No, because I think this has been such a great panel, and I don't think anything got left unsaid. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a cop out and just piggyback on. I think what resonated the most for me was what I heard from Wayne, which is, it is absolutely not just about, practicing and doing it. It is about living it. So once you start practicing Agile, you'll find that you start applying it even at home and at work and at school and whatever is going on. You just start sort of unconsciously thinking about things and problem solving in different ways. And I think it creates a much more robust and much more, I can't think of the word, resilient way of working, of living. And for me, that's the biggest win as being, part of this Agile process for me. And the biggest thing that I love about Agile is that it informs everything that we do. So thanks for a really amazing conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wayne.
I agree with that. A great panel. I've learned a lot myself. A friend of mine has a saying, be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. Again, be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. You're never going to have all the answers. Don't expect to. To me, HR is a great opportunity to facilitate. You can't develop people. You can only facilitate them developing themselves. It's a different mindset than we've had in HR before. And I think it's great because everybody is an individual and we can't prescribe one size fits all. So the job I would recommend, we didn't really talk about, is can you facilitate success of others by adding value to what they need from you? And then we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Wayne. Kelly.
Oh, I'll just keep it quick as well. The customer is the key. So, I just say, if you don't know where to start, just talk with people. I think I'll leave it with we build things with the customers, not for them, and it usually works really well.
Thank you so very much, Mindy.
I loved being on this panel. Once again, I am walking away with learnings. It's always such a great opportunity. I feel like we talked about a lot of things. To wrap it up, I love what Kelly was saying, because often HR feels like they're on their own. They're on their own island, and Agile is that bridge to co-share, to co-design. You are not alone. And there's so much burnout, and I see so many incredible HR leaders really uncertain about what's next for them. And should I even continue to be an HR leader? And if you haven't thought about Agile, this might be the door to open, to step through, to find the room to breathe.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Pamela, Mindy, Kelly, and Wayne. It was wonderful. Thank you, everybody in the audience. If you already joined the link for the next panel, or if you are rolling with us into the next one, please do allow us a couple of minutes just to get some water and a quick standing up from the desk, and enjoy the chair dance pre-live routine. And I will be welcoming you all very soon. Once again, wonderful panel, wonderful conversation. I will advocate for an entire series on this topic with Enrique. Thank you, everyone. See you in a few minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones as you listen or watch us either now live or later in the recording. And welcome to the second panel of the day and the last panel of November. Welcome back to everyone who stayed on the link and rolled over from the previous panel. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour or so. We have Jessa backstage taking good care of us. So please do say a big thank you, Jessa, if you enjoy our Hacking HR events. The credit goes to her as well. And also, a lot of credit goes to, as always, our lineup of speakers. And we will ask them to share with us today their insights on designing systems of compensation, benefits, recognition, and rewards that respond to changing needs of the workforce. So, Jessa, please do help me bring up the speakers on stage. Hello, everyone. So good to see your faces and looking forward to this conversation. Let's wrap November series up with a big bang of inspiration and energy. And I will also ask everybody in the audience to join us in the conversation. So please use the chat generously and drop your insights, drop your stories, and drop any kind of resources that you have been finding particularly helpful and meaningful in your work, and help us grow the community for everybody's benefits. Now, let's start the conversation, and it's gonna be an easy one. We will start with a round of introductions. So I will kindly ask you shortly introduce yourselves and do let us know what exactly from this topic is so near and dear to your heart that you said, oh, I'm gonna be there for 1 hour and talk about systems of compensation. Anush, good to see you. Welcome.
Hey Manula, how are you doing?
Always happy when I see people on the screen.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining from different parts of the world. My name is Anuj Kathuria. I'm based in Mumbai, India. After having spent 21 years in the corporate life, I decided to start my own organization and now run a startup by the name Cognitio, which works in the area of HR strategy, HR digitalization, and culture. What excited me about this topic, Manola, is the fact is I would like to answer it in just simple one word. It's called transformation.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Anu, so good to see you. It's been a while.
Great to see you too. Hello, everyone. My name is Anu Mandapati, and I'm based out of Austin, Texas, in the US. And for me, why I get really excited about this topic is all of this is connected to the employee experience. And we get employee experience right, then we get more engaged employees and we have more successful companies. So for me, when we talk about all of these, Manola, that's what drives me here.
So good to have you. Erin, good to see you. Welcome on this panel.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Nice to be here. I'm Erin. I'm the head of people operations for a startup called 86 Repairs. I'm based in Chicago, Illinois. The reason why this panel kind of resonated with me was because I think to the earlier word of transformation, I think we've seen so much change in the way we think about compensation strategies and introduction of transparency and how we think about pay banding. And it's a really exciting opportunity, I think, for HR professionals to lean in and create some alignment with the companies that they work for, and also provide their employees insight into how we think about compensation, really kind of lift the veil on what has been kind of hidden behind, Oz's black curtain for so long. So we have a real opportunity to kind of change the dynamic here between employee and company about how we think about compensation. So excited to be here.
Thank you. And last but not least, it's so good to welcome you on the panel. Is it Lela? Is it Leela?
It's Lela.
Lela.
Just hello.
Keep it safe from Starbucks moments.
It's okay. I'm used to it. And it's really nice to meet you all. I'm Lela Tapuria. I'm over 15 years in the HR field, and out of it, around 10 years in banking sector. So why I'm excited to participate in this concrete panel is that the compensation and right reward system is a part of the employee satisfaction and the happiness. And as the HR part, we're responsible for it, which connects to the retention, their stability, and performance of the organization.
It's wonderful having all of you here, and I will just ask for a little bit of help from the audience. If you can just drop us a few comments, just let us know where you're connecting from. The biggest ask there is just help us put our minds at ease that we're not stuck in some LinkedIn live loop somewhere in the backstage of the internet. Now, I was thinking about the topic, and although it is not as frequent, there are still organizations who use rewards, recognition, benefits, compensation, total rewards pretty much interchangeably, and the conversation gets a little bit muddied. And I was wondering, before we jump very, very deep into, you mentioned employee engagement. I do feel that there's also a strong component of company culture in this conversation that will come up. Can we demystify a little bit and put some meaning to the words that we are going to use moving forward? So compensation, benefits, recognition, and rewards. And I don't know why I tend to go diagonally with the first question. That means, Eric, you will be our pioneer for today.
And I will apologize for my dog who might come in and out. So if you see a little tiny creature, he's a 10-pound rescue Chihuahua. He has a mind of his own. I can't control him. I think they're very interconnected, but I do think that as we think, to me, I kind of separate compensation and benefits and total rewards in that they each satisfy a different component of what someone is doing at work, what they want out of work. So for me, compensation is kind of like, how are they making and affording a living wage? How do we as a company think about how we pay our folks? What does that look like from a base salary or a bonus perspective? And then benefits can range anywhere from, traditionally, I think everyone's head goes to medical or healthcare benefits, but there's such a wide range. And I think over the last 10 years, specifically in the tech sector, we've seen companies really lean into very creative benefits as a way to incentivize folks to come and work for their organization, as opposed to some of the larger legacy organizations. So I think benefits have really changed over the last 10 years as well. And then to me, total rewards also includes things like opportunities for growth and development. What one is personally getting out of the organization outside of just the base salary, the benefits. So that might thinking like professional development fund or something like that. So I kind of think of them as very interconnected, but also disparate parts of thinking through rewards programs at a company.
And you all know the unmuting competition is now officially open. So let's build our conversation from here. Who would like to? Anu.
I think, Erin, you said it all. I think that was, really, really well stated. And the only other thing that I think I would add is just the recognition piece. It's interesting because sometimes when people think about recognition, it's just about one-on-one conversations, but how do we provide visibility into that? So adding recognition as a piece of this when we're looking at it holistically at the system level too, because it's different if I'm having a one-on-one conversation and I provide that feedback, but how do we actually provide visibility and how do we actually champion and celebrate people at a larger level too? So I think recognition would definitely be, that piece of it. What are they being celebrated for? What was the impact of their work? So being really specific in that feedback too when we recognize them. And so a lot of companies do that through some sort of a point system, some sort of, if you get I don't know, X amount of recognition, it turns into X amount of dollars, for example. And so that might look different from organization to organization, but I think recognition is a very important part of this as well, because all of it, as we've said, it ties into employee engagement, the employee experience, and really the transformation of a company.
Lela.
Yeah, what I would then agree with the colleagues that it's all the three titles that you have mentioned are somehow different, but in addition, overall they are meaningful for in one component that it's really important to have all those three very specific to the persons in the individually based. Somehow it's outdated to have all one set that is all common for benefits and compensation for all the personnel that we have, but rather than think about what is the important for the individuals, and also think about what is the culture of the company and how it's worked best for them in this certain cases.
And Anush.
Well, couldn't agree more with what Erin said. Just a small differentiation that comes to my mind. Recognition, benefits, both could be monetary or non-monetary. Compensation definitely has to be monetary. It cannot be a non-monetary compensation, right? And one starking difference of a matter of fact that binds the thread between all these three is the fact that you cannot play with certain parts depending on the statutes, but the others you can play with to bring in the right level of hyper personalization or hyper contextualization when it comes to your compensation, rewards, or benefit strategy. Like from a compensation standpoint, there are certain statutory guidelines. You have to have certain parts in the compensation you cannot play with. But with the other pieces, organizations today have, I think, a huge canvas to paint the way they want and change the culture or transform into a different beast altogether.
I would love to pick two conversation candies that you already dropped and weave them together into a question. So we talked about transformation. Erin, you mentioned that over the past 5-10 years, people got very creative in this space. And Anu, I loved your point on employee engagement. So I was wondering with how the creativity came to be harnessed in this domain, and with everything that we've experienced, COVID, quiet quitting, great resignation, rage applying, you name it. I am curious, how is employee engagement driving the thinking around compensation and benefits and rewards? And also the other way around. And Anu, I would invite you to go first.
Sure. So when I think about employee engagement, that's what we want the outcome to be. So what's the process that gets us there is employee experience. So as we think about employee experience and and all of what we're able to offer, and these are all what makes an organization competitive for us to actually want to be part of that organization. For me to want to join an organization, I want to know that it's competitive compensation. And especially, all areas, but especially in tech, I would say that I work in the tech industry. So I think that we've really been creative as to what it is that we're offering and how we're offering it when it comes to benefits, when it comes to recognition. A lot of benefits make the total package more competitive than just the compensation. And so I'm seeing that a lot of people are looking at benefits because now I think the conversation for employee engagement is, it's not just about money. It's about what's my total experience? How is this impacting my life? And how is work a piece of my life? So it's not, I'm not living to, I'm not living to work. Work is a part of my life. So when we think about employee engagement, how are we creating this experience for all employees so they feel more connected, they feel valued, they feel appreciated, they feel recognized, they're getting all of those needs met, so then they actually can be high producers, they actually can be high performing, and they'll actually stick around as well.
Erin, please.
I love everything you just said. I totally agree. I think what you're also referencing is this kind of shift from what we saw maybe 20 years ago, which is here's our package and this is it. And now it's a much more individualized experience where you can kind of pull on different levers for different individuals or roles, and people can kind of customize the experience they want out of companies. I like to think of it as several F's. And as individuals or as managers or as leaders, we try to understand what individuals' F's are. So that could be fortune, whether that's, base compensation or bonus, family, that meaning like flexibility of maybe it's remote work as an offering, or maybe it's more of a work-life blend or wellness benefits. And then fit or fame, which is where do I fit within the organization? What opportunities for growth do I have? And I think at various points of our career, we really have different drivers. So maybe early in our career, we're just like, let's get that title, let's get the money, and let's grow, grow, grow. But later in our career, we might be trying to slow down a little bit and want something where we have more flexibility and more opportunities to spend time with our families. So I think as leaders, it's important to understand the individual needs. And as HR professionals, it's important to offer a wide range of benefits that people can opt into, whether that's a title or a growth plan, or whether it's compensation or benefits or policies that we can write to adapt to this idea that everyone wants something that's a little more customized. I think that's just where our society is going. Everyone wants to be treated like an individual and seen as such.
Anuj, would you like to go?
I think I agree with what Erin said. I think predominantly what's led to this is simply the supply demand cycle. Now, if you would say that employee engagement or employee experience didn't exist a decade or so before, I would refute that. It existed. Yes, there are certain things which have gotten a name because of the way we are living. We are living in a world where novelties of morning become obsolete by the evening. And there have been so many of such changes that have happened last decade plus. Now, what really brought these things to the forefront or gave them spotlight is the skill instability that we have seen in various sectors across the globe. As business models have changed, the demands for new skills, for different skills, for growth has changed. And globalization in many sectors has suddenly opened up that bubble. And now, just look at what happened 3, 4 years back. I know for a fact that there were certain segments of the IT workforce who were demanding 5 times, 6 times the salaries. They would have 5 to 7 different offer letters from 20 different organizations. How was that possible? It's simply supply demand game. Now, also the rise in the consumer experience sector and the expectation that as an employee, we are a consumer for an organization. So why cannot we expect the same level of experience you want to give to your end customers? Some of these levers have actually contributed to people thinking in a very different tangent altogether. And it's not only in the field of compensation benefits, it's in every specific domain of HR. Now, yes, when the employee experience bandwagon suddenly spurted. The name employee experience was coined by certain experts. People started looking at the entire, uh, value stream from the time somebody was a prospective candidate till the time somebody became an alum of the organization. What are the moments that matter in the lifespan of that employee? Can we look at providing, moments of magic at every such touch point? That started this journey. And then, okay, if we can do that, how can we hyper personalize and hyper contextualize that for every single individual? And that then came into, okay, let's slice and dice compensation, benefits, recognition, total rewards. What can we do? What we cannot do? And depending on different segments of employees, depending on whatever career level they are at, like Erin said, whatever are the drivers at a respective stage in their career, the needs are very different. The drivers are very different. For somebody, it is more about money, and it still is. For some people, it's more about, okay, certain elements of wellness. For certain people, it's about wealth creation. For some people, it's about growth in the organization. For some people, it's about breadth of experience. For some people, it's about depth of experience. So organizations have had no other option but to finally look at, okay, how do we bring all these things together? And you rightly said, it is not just that these changes are happening in the compensation arena. It's about, if you look at the DNA of your organization, which is your culture, this formulates a very important element of what your fabric is composed of. How are you looking at giving this differentiation and yet keeping the entire engine running smoothly, keeping both the stakeholders, your shareholders, and thirdly, your own consumers, your employees happy and engaged at the same point of time.
Thank you so very much. Lela.
Well, actually, I would add the topic from the part from the employer branding issue, that why we should be having the good compensation or reward system is about that we want to be, from the organization perspective, the employer of choice. In the period and the environment where we are having the scarcity of the workforce, really, and somehow the people migrating, at least I'm based in Tbilisi, Georgia, and in our country, we are really suffering from the migration and brain drain of the young people. So we are creating and we're thinking of creating a special or a tailored compensation or reward system just to be attractive for those people who need to build a business and put the organization to the best performance. So this is a really issue for us, and I do believe for the majority of the companies. And in addition to this, Anuj said that recognition is really important. There was a research from McKinsey saying that up to 55% of the people are staying in the company because they are recognized well and they feel that they are recognized. So somehow this is really important to have the balance with the monetary compensation and rewards, and non-monetary as well. Yeah.
I am curious about one thing, and maybe I am under the joyful influence of the previous panel when we talked about taking HR as a mindset way beyond the HR function as an organizational slice. So while listening to all of your insights, I was wondering, who does what when it comes to systems of compensation and benefits and rewards? Because although traditionally this was an HR thing, it doesn't sound like an exclusively HR thing anymore. And can we look at some of the key stakeholders, the decision makers, the decision drivers, and pretty much who's who in the zoo of the compensation, benefits, and rewards. And let's see who wants to tackle this one first.
I'll go with this. So, see, HR is not separate from the business. It's a part of the business, right? Your people strategy cannot exist without your business strategy. It is an offshoot of your business strategy. Now, when you look at elements like compensation, benefits, recognition, total rewards, and many such different connotations, it is not just the accountability of HR to design, roll out, implement, run everything. There are multiple stakeholders who are involved in this. Now, for example, when you're looking, a basic thing, when you're looking at offering stock options, now HR itself cannot do that. You have to work with your CEO, you have to work with the CFO to figure out what percentage are we going to keep for current employees? What are we going to offer to keep for the future employees? What are we going to give in the market? What kind of plan are we going for? Very much involvement of CFO into that. When you are looking at employer branding, where you want to really scout for great talent and position your organization where you are the best in every domain of experience, you definitely require the help of marketing. When you are looking at wellness, now wellness is not just about physical wellness. You have mental wellness, emotional wellness, societal wellness. There are multiple different elements in that. You involve experts in your organization who hail from that respective field. It is not just the sole, HR is not the flag bearer for this, to be honest, in today's time and date. It is, I would say, the job is to look at how do you make the best of what you have today in your organization. It's not about what you bring on table or what others bring on table. It's about having everybody putting their best on the table together, co-creating what needs to be your compensation strategy, or for that matter of fact, your total rewards philosophy in the organization. Whether you are looking at growth opportunities, you cannot plan somebody's growth if you do not understand what is going to be the career lattice in your organization. For that, you need to work with every single business head. What is the operating model blueprint of the organization, and basis that, and first and foremost, what exactly is your business trying to do? If you don't know that and don't have inputs from there, you really can't weave together all these tangential points together. So everybody, starting from your chief financial officer to your business heads to your vertical function heads to your chief marketing officer to your chief strategy officer, everybody plays a big role in this.
I see a lot of approving nods across the screen. Anu.
Manila, I'm still laughing at when you asked the question, you said who's who in the zoo. So I still find that really funny. And true, right? Who's who in the zoo. Everything that was just said, I completely agree. And I think that we've got so many stakeholders and we're doing this in partnership. We're co-creating, and I say we're co-creating with our employees as well. One of the things I've done in multiple companies is we actually focus on self-identification campaigns so people can actually share their demographic information around diversity dimensions. So then we actually have a very clear understanding, not the traditional gender and just race and et cetera, but even things like parent and caregiver status, for example. So when I know in an organization that X percentage are caregivers or X percentage are parents, then I can think about what are some of those other benefits, whether it's employee resource groups, whether it's actually fertility benefits, maybe it's, caregiving resources to really support our people. So I think we also work hand in hand as one of those stakeholders are our employees. Find out who we have and what are their needs, and we make sure that we're designing all of this with our people. And that co-creation, if I feel that my company is listening to me and to my needs, I'm more likely to stay there because I feel, again, going back to that feeling valued, appreciated, cared for, celebrated, this is a company that's investing in me in a variety of ways. So everything, Anuja, that you just said, and I would add even employees are stakeholders as well.
Couldn't agree more with you, Anu. In fact, I know of organizations where I've worked where we actually deploy design thinking at its best levels to figure out what employee needs and for what kind of benefit, what their emotions are, what their affinity mapping to each of the benefits or rewards or recognition are. So you cannot create that sitting in an ivory tower by yourself. You have to have both sides of the coin together and look at how do you balance the needs of the organization versus the needs of the employees as well. So you can't, in today's time and age, it's not a one man's job or HR department's job. You need to have multiple stakeholders to chime in and co-create.
Lela, I saw you unmuted there for a second.
Yeah, just to add a short note that I totally agree with the colleagues. And one important thing that I'm always considering in the process of implementing any system is the environment, economic environment of the country, of the company also, and market research, what the competitors do, and vice versa, what we are able to propose to our existing staff, and what we have as a value proposition for the external people to attract them. So, yeah.
Erin.
I would agree with what everyone said here, and I love the idea of thinking of our employee population as a stakeholder, because I think though we do a lot of engagement surveys and listening tours, we probably don't put them in that frame of mind as they are our end users, they are our customers. So if we think about how a go-to-market team or a product team structures their roadmap, we can take a lot of learnings from that as a people team as well, or an HR team, and think about them as our end users. And one thing that what I've done when I've come into organizations is really done that kind of listening tour early on to understand where are the more critical gaps as it relates to whether it's compensation or scopes of work or frameworks. And in my most recent organization, there was a lot of kind of chatter about folks not feeling like they were paid fairly. And to me, that flagged a misalignment or misunderstanding of how compensation is set. So we did a lot of education around what is our compensation philosophy, and we didn't have one, so we wrote one, right? Like, and talked about why are we paying you this market rate versus what you might receive at a larger company? What would it do if we paid everyone at this rate to the organization? And really taught them about even gross margins and get into the weeds of those kinds of things, because I think that just gives people an understanding of why they're paid what they're paid. And when we feel we're unpaid fairly, a lot of times it's because we don't understand why this is our salary right now, or how to grow that if that's our choice through compensation planning or growth planning, and doing those frameworks like we talked about. So that education piece, I think, is often something that's missing from a stakeholder perspective, is not just the employee population, but how are we training our leaders and our managers who are the front lines of these conversations to talk about compensation and educate them how HR is setting up compensation philosophy so they can feel empowered to lead those conversations in a way that they feel comfortable with, and they're not just kind of spouting the company line, they actually believe what they're saying.
Well, as we are a few minutes into the second half of our conversation, just a big wholehearted welcome to everyone who joined a little bit later. And the next question, Erin, you triggered my curiosity with something that you just said, and I was wondering, what are some of the most difficult conversations within an organization when it comes to this topic, and how can people in the audience navigate those meaningfully? Wherever inspiration strikes, and if you have a story that you're comfortable sharing, I'm sure that people will relate to that. So, difficult conversations and how to navigate those. I see smiles, so there's definitely history and war stories there. So let's
it's difficult to pick up one war story, Minola. This is full of battles, and I'm sure all my co-panelists would agree on that. Because here you're talking about spending money. And when you talk about spending money, the biggest battle is with the money man in the organization. Right? And equally important is the people who have to receive the money, because they always feel they are being paid less. You do a survey with 1 million people and ask them, are you being paid fairly? And 99.9% people will say, no, they are not being paid fair. It's not about to a certain extent, I agree with what Erin says. Yes, education, very important. Enrollment, very important. But beyond that as well, we are living in times where you have 10 different organizations who would pay more than what you are paying, who would offer certain different benefits than what you are offering. So you will always have difficult conversations. The moment you start crafting your bonus strategy for the year, or your how much bonus do we need to give to people this year, depending on what your EBITDA is, what your revenue market share this year is, or where you're looking at in terms of gross margins, gross profit, you will always have a challenge. Should we reinvest part of our profit into further growth, or should we give a percentage of that to our employees? If you're going to give 6% of that as bonus, why not 5% this year? Why 4%? The moment you start talking about employee stock options, you will always have voices in the room, in that boardroom saying, oh no, let's not give this much, let's give only this much. The moment you say, okay, there is a need to look at benefits from a very different standpoint, right? Let's also look, so far we have only looked at non-monetary recognition. Let's look at monetary recognition, point system. They can perhaps exchange those points for certain goodies and think, oh, that's a cost. You will always hear that. And when you speak to employees, you will always hear, we are being paid less. XYZ organization or my friends in different places get more benefits than what you are offering. And that's where I really love what Erin said. It is about contextualization. What Leila also said. It's about the way to navigate, the way at least I have navigated. And believe me, I've failed 100 times initially in those conversations. I would have failed 100 times. I would have walked out of that door with my shoulders literally dropped. And I lost a battle. I don't know what to do now. Because I was not convinced myself. And that's because sometimes you need to have the impetus to put, we play these conversations with our emotions. Because at the end of it, we are also an employee. But when you are having those conversations, you need to be very sure, what hat are you wearing? Are you wearing the hat of an advocate? Are you wearing the hat of an HR champion? Are you wearing the hat of an employee? Or are you wearing the hat of a key stakeholder in that organization? Now, mind you, the moment you start segregating that in your head, you can very well compartmentalize your thoughts, your emotions, your facts in different corners. And then you play these conversations with the what if thing. What if we don't do this? What's going to be the ramification of that? If we do this, what's going to be the consequence of this? And like Leila said, you always take help of certain market research in that I believe benchmarks are worst to refer to because they are an impediment when it comes to innovation. Use them as market research and then say, okay, this is where the market today is. What is our business plan? What is our business context? Where do we need to go? Because if we need to go there, then we need to have XYZ in place. You cannot win. I'm sorry to say this, but you cannot win an F1 race in a Mini Cooper. I'm sorry, you cannot. Or if you say, you know what, I will buy the body of a McLaren and I'll put the engine of somebody else and then let's run. No, it's not going to work. It's not a piecemeal thing. You say, I'll do this and not do this. If you do something, it has to be a complete ecosystem approach because every decision you take impacts something in the business. $1 spent on wellness would be $1 taken out from your CFO's. If I wear a CFO's hat, will be $1 taken out of the revenue. $1 per profit spent on this. So you need to be very sure with what ratios you're talking about. What is the outcome you are looking at from a business standpoint? And the only way I've been able to win these conversations is I don't talk when I talk to business in terms of HR terminologies. Doesn't work. You need to talk to them in the language they understand. When you talk to marketing, you need to talk to them in terms of brand, top of mind recall, brand index. When you talk to CFO, you need to talk to him in terms of profit per employee, cost per employee, cost as a percentage of EBITDA and all those things. And what is the impact going to be if you do these things? So that has helped me at least navigate those conversations towards the later half of my career. That's what my insight is. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj. Great points. Let's see who has other scars to show and knowledge to share. Lela.
I'll do that shortly. So, Anuj, I totally agree with you, and I had the same experience with failures and with the winnings. But what I learned, so it's really much depends on the company culture and also the size of the company. Actually, when the company size is not that big much, it's easier to communicate. and easier to explain one by one, even in the person with the person. When the company is a big and it's really a corporation, it's really hard to communicate one by one and in a person, but it's really much depends on the management and the culture. What do they accept and what they don't? And also whether we have the respect of the rules, which should be the same from starting the management, finishing with the lowest level and entry level positions. But what I faced and what worked in my personal experience the best is the open communication, explaining how this strategy, how this structure comes from, why it was built based on what, and why we're doing it, including all types of communication, especially when it's related to the monetary compensation is the most difficult to communicate. And in this case, people where they are feeling treated unfairly. So when it's discussed and shared why and how this was built and why they are in this situation and how they are structured in this grade or this step or that step. Well, this is even in these cases, there will be lots of questions from the employees, lots of questions from the management, lots of questions from everyone. But at least when we have the rule, all needs to follow those rules. Otherwise, there will be a lot of chaos, and it's really complicated, and it's really difficult to manage them. Thank you.
Erin, please.
I think something that was said, Layla said, that I would echo, which is the conversations that managers, arming them with information is really important. And I think managers inherently will try to fight for more money for their teams because they feel like if this person leaves, I'm up a creek, I don't have this person, I have to go and hire, and oh my God, that's going to take so much time. So it's easier just to pay this person more because they will otherwise quit and go to one of those other companies that will pay them 10 times more. And I think a lot of times those conversations in organizations can get outsourced to HR, like HR is not letting me pay you anymore, or the CFO is cutting budgets this year, I can't do anything about it, which can really erode a lot of trust. And you see that in your engagement surveys where an population might rate their manager as really favorable, but the SLT or senior leadership team is, tanked. There's not a lot of trust there. And so in the end, that hurts both the company, the manager, and the employee, because the employee feels like they're being treated unfairly. So they're likely to leave anyway. The manager loses that employee. They've also lost trust that they're an advocate in that process from the employee because they feel like they've outsourced that decision to another person. So I think it really has to start with alignment with that leadership team and helping them understand that just giving someone compensation to offset the fact that they might quit, even if they're a middle performer, is not helping them because the manager needs someone who is going to do their very best work. And that's when you pay that person a higher salary, right? So I think there's a lot of, there's some performance management, I think, weaving into some of these conversations as well, which, organizations do pay for performance differently, but I do think is part of this conversation around compensation and bonus pay and all these other things. It's how are we telling people this is how you get paid more, and then how are we holding managers to that kind of platform, so they say this is how we pay, this is you're doing well or you're not, and that also leads into ongoing feedback and making sure we're doing radical candor. So there's a lot of kind of interesting things that are weaving their way into just a compensation conversation.
Yeah. I agree with everything that's been shared. And I think back to, I worked in an organization, Quicken Loans, many years ago, and one of the values is we are the they. And so it's not HR is making me do this, or HR didn't let me do this. It's we are in this together. And so we are making this decision. And I think, Erin, to what you just shared too, if we operate differently because we're scared that someone's leaving, what's the message it sends every other employee? Well, it was done for this person, now it's not done for me. So it's a ripple effect in a negative way to so many other employees because they're watching and seeing how, this leader will make exceptions, mine does not. Well, I'm on a really terrible team, I want to be on that team. And so the damage that that impact that actually can impact so much more of the organization, but that leader is only thinking about that specific situation. So I think definitely, what are those clear guidelines? How do we communicate it, and how do we provide those talking points and support our leaders in having these conversations? And exactly with what you just said, because it happens in every single organization, and I don't see many organizations providing the tools to leaders saying, if this is the impact of what can happen if you can say that. So instead of saying this, you can try it this way. And as HR, we're here as your partners. We can role play those conversations. We can do what we need to do to help support you in that.
I'm trying to word this question as I think that might be a dangerous thing to do, but bear with me. So as we talk about how systems of compensation, benefits, and rewards are evolving, they have been evolving, and I get the sense from our conversation that the future will bring just new layers of challenges and opportunities and questions. When it comes to designing these systems, what would be some skills and competencies, capabilities that you would recommend HR to develop within HR, but also potentially within the other functions, the other pockets of the organization? I heard a bit of design thinking. I heard quite a lot of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management. But I am curious, is there one particular skill that you would say this is, the first among equals? And is there something outside of the usual suspects that pops to mind? I would be very curious to hear your thoughts. Anu, I see you smiling.
Yeah. I think Erin actually just mentioned it a little while ago. For me, it's that product ownership. And so if we're actually thinking about our employees as the user, right, what is that user experience like? So if we're actually thinking about compensation or thinking about anything else and using that lens as this is a product, how are we going to market? What are we going to do differently to make sure stakeholders are aware, but also how are we getting buy-in from the people who are actually going to be the recipients of this? I think that shifts everything. And a lot of companies, most companies haven't been thinking that way, because as Anuja, as you had talked about earlier, it's this, it's kind of this pendulum back and forth of, okay, employers, companies, have the power. Now it's employees, and it's going to go back and forth and back and forth. And our people strategy has to be aligned with the business strategy. If it's not, then we're not going to go anywhere. So how do we design this experience for people so we can actually achieve our outcomes as a business, and having that hat on of, I'm a product owner and this is the product, I think can shift everything significantly.
Erin.
I would add too, I think I found myself over the last several years, as I'm building out compensation banding, data analysis and analytics is really important. And I'm coming from organizations that are sub 200 people, and I have very limited resources. So for me, it's pulling spreadsheets and doing very rudimentary analysis on my own. But in larger organizations, really partnering with your analytics team can help give some objectivity to how we're thinking about compensation banding, which can take feeling and emotion out of that process, which I think is going to be a skill set even more important as we're thinking even engagement survey. How are we doing that analysis to assess our benefits programs against the populations of the teams we have? I think will continue to be a skill set we'll need to hone on the HR side of things.
The battle for the hot seat of going last. Who wants to? Lela.
Yeah. By the way, I do agree about the role of product owner and the skills of analytics and the business acumen that we usually call it. But on the other hand, I would also add this empathy skill, because it's really important, because we are HR and we are somewhere in the middle of the business and the staff as well. When we're talking about tailoring the benefits and reward and recognition strategies, somehow we need to consider what really impacts and really works for the staff, really at the end has the impact on the business. So maybe considering somehow this empathy and skill of having power to have the very deep communication and reading the numbers and translating into the human metric discussions, so have the right offers for them as well.
I think in addition to what my colleagues have said, I'll add 2 or 3 more. For me, I mean, if I look at the entire spectrum of hard skills and soft skills, I would rate authenticity as number one. Because someone who is going to design the compensation system for the organization, I mean, let's keep a hand on heart. I mean, I have done this and I'm guilty as charged for that. I would typically look at what I have done in my previous organization, contextualize that to the current one. Okay, here we go. That's typically how it happens in 90% places. So you have to be authentic. That am I truly wanting to design something for the betterment of the organ after you have understood the business dynamics, you have all the people, you have all the business plans, your business imperatives in place, and you know the cash flow and everything and whatever. Are you really being authentic in designing something from scratch? Number one. Number two is communication. Very, very important from both standpoints. Your stakeholders, once you design this, you have to get it approved by the stakeholders. And after it is approved, you have to communicate that to the other set of stakeholders. So, and number three, I think very underrated skill, resilience. Do you have it or not? Because you'll be badgered. No matter you create the world's best compensation, total rewards, benefit strategy, you will be badgered by either of the sides. Do you have the resilience in you to withstand it all and still make it a success? Is what defines you. For me, these are 3 very important things. I mean, on a lighter note, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, one of my friends told me it happened in his organization. They had a bad year. I mean, bad years compared to the last year. They had good revenues. They were not in losses, they were in profits, but profits had come down little by a couple of points as compared to last year. Increments were given, not as compared to last year, much lesser. When the employees ask their managers why less increments, I have performed this, I've got this rating, most of the managers went back and blamed the HR. Oh, that's what HR is given. And I mean, sometimes I get shocks, nightmare when I listen to this. Some people over the weekend went to the HR department where it's written Department of Human Resources. They changed it to Department of Human Remains and posted it in the entire organization. This happens. This happens if you are not authentic, not communicating properly, and are not resilient.
Well, we are about 3 minutes away from wrapping this conversation up. And I would really love to hear if you have a punchline style, famous last words on today's panel for the audience. And please consider this a topic-free question. Is there something that you want to highlight from what you already mentioned, or is there something that is very meaningful to you? We didn't get to touch on this particular point, but you do want to leave a nugget of wisdom as a goodbye gift to our audience. And what we will do, we will go counterclockwise from how we started. Lela, you will go first. I will just give everybody just a few more seconds. reconfirm that this conversation is being recorded, and you can see it later either on our LinkedIn page or hackinghrlab.io, our platform. And Lela, ready to go? Famous final words for today.
Famous final. Okay, so what I would add, just prepare the staff and the management for the communication. And the preparation phase is really hard and not easy, and it's really personal. Structure the compensation and rewards system so that it affects all layers in the organization. And be sure that it really tackles all the layers. So therefore, we need to learn market, learn what the competitors have, what are the needs, personal needs, maybe with the different tools. I mean, a lot of researches, a lot of internal surveys, and etc. And be open with the communication when they are ready to hear it. It's really important.
Thank you so.
Better stop it.
Thank you so very much, Lela. Erin.
Try to make this brief. First, I want to thank my fellow panelists. It was a really great, engaging conversation. So thank you for participating with me. I think there's an opportunity for HR and people teams to reframe compensation as an us versus them, as a we're in this together. And the we're in this together is we want to pay you fairly for the work you're doing, and your work is helping the organization succeed. And I think we can take a lot of that contention out by opening up some transparency and really having some candid conversations with our folks about what this topic means, which is how are you getting paid and why? And if we can do that, I think we'll see a lot more innovation in this space.
Thank you so much. I see mic drops moments going strong. So Anu.
Thank you also to you, Manola, as well as my fellow panelists. And I'm just going to say, focus on the title of this session, the second half of it. It's about responding to the changing needs of the workforce. As organizations evolve, so will the needs of our workforce. It cannot be one and done. It has to be something that we stay on top of and continue to assess on a regular basis.
Thank you so very much. Anuj, wrap November up.
I'll use the famous words of Dr. Abraham Maslow. He said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. So I would recommend people to innovate, co-create, and celebrate.
Thank you. Lela, Erin, Anu, Anuj. It was a joy. It was a privilege. It was an amazing conversation to send us off into, I hope, a calm and kind month of December. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for taking the time and the curiosity to be here with us. And also a wholehearted thank you to Enrique and Jessa for creating the context and the community and the drive behind all this. Thank you, everyone. And I hope I will get to welcome as many of you as possible soon again. Thank you.
Thank you, Manola.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.